He just wanted to do the right thing, but when a broke single dad read one unsent message on a lost phone, he uncovered a secret so painful it would destroy a CEO's world and rewrite both their destinies forever. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The November rain fell in heavy sheets, drumming against the windshield of Ethan Cole's rusty pickup truck. His weathered hands gripped the steering wheel, his shoulders aching from a long day of hauling scrap metal. The smell of rust and rain clung to his work clothes, but he managed a tired smile as he pulled into the church parking lot where Lily waited. Through the rain-streaked glass, he spotted her small figure huddled under the church's awning, her pink backpack clutched close. Miss Jenkins, the after-school program coordinator, stood beside her with an umbrella. Ethan put the truck in park and grabbed his worn jacket from the passenger seat. "Coming? Sweetheart," he called out, jogging through the rain to reach them. Lily's face lit up at the sight of him, her eyes bright despite the gloomy weather. "Daddy!" She launched herself into his arms, not minding the dampness of his clothes. "I made you something today?" Miss Jenkins smiled warmly. "Lily's quite the artist. She spent all afternoon working on it." "Is that right?" Ethan ruffled his daughter's hair, grateful for these small moments that made the long days worthwhile. "Well, let's get you somewhere dry so you can show me." They said their goodbyes to Miss Jenkins and hurried to the truck. Once inside, Lily pulled out a slightly crumpled piece of paper from her backpack. "Look, it's us at Christmas," she announced proudly. Ethan studied the crayon drawing while the defroster worked to clear the foggy windshield. Two stick figures, one tall, one small, stood beside a decorated tree. Angels floated above them, drawn in silver glitter. "That's beautiful, honey," he said, softly, his heart catching at the sight of the angels. Sarah had loved angels. He pushed the thought away and started the truck. "We need to stop for milk and bread. That okay with you?" Lily nodded, already humming Silent Night under her breath. The sound filled the cab of the truck with a gentle warmth that fought back against the cold and wet outside. The gas station's fluorescent lights created weak halos in the misty rain as Ethan pulled up to a pump. "Stay put while I fill up," he told Lily, who was now drawing invisible pictures on the fogged-up passenger window. The pump's display flickered as Ethan inserted his card, praying there would be enough in the account to cover both the gas and groceries. The rain had settled into a steady drizzle, soaking through his jacket as he waited for the tank to fill. That's when he saw it, a gleam of metal and glass in the puddle by his feet. Reaching down, he retrieved a smartphone in a sleek case, water beating off its surface. The screen lit up at his touch, revealing several missed calls from a contact labeled Mom's Hospice Nurse. Ethan's stomach tightened. Someone was probably worried sick about this phone, especially if it involved a sick parent. He looked around the empty gas station lot, but there were no other customers in sight. "What did you find, Daddy?" Lily called from the truck, her breath creating a new patch of fog on the window. "Just a phone someone dropped," he answered, pocketing it for safekeeping. "Let's grab that milk and bread." Inside the store, Lily's shoes squeaked against the linoleum as she followed him to the dairy case. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows in the nearly empty store. An old radio behind the counter played static-filled Christmas carols. "Can we get the bread with the sesame seeds?" Lily asked, pointing to a loaf on the top shelf. "Please?" Ethan checked the price difference, only 30 cents more. "Sure, sweetheart." He reached for the loaf, remembering how Sarah used to make French toast with sesame bread on Sunday mornings. The memory came with less pain than usual, softened by Lily's delighted smile. Back in the truck, Lily clutched the grocery bag in her lap while Ethan examined the found phone more carefully. The screen kept lighting up with notifications, 3 more missed calls from the hospice nurse, and what looked like unread text messages. "Maybe we can find out who it belongs to," Lily suggested, peering at the phone. "Like in that movie where the dog finds his way home?" Ethan smiled at her comparison. Good thinking, though this might be a bit different than a lost dog. The drive home was short, their small trailer park just off the main road. Christmas lights had already appeared on some of the homes, twinkling bravely against the dreary weather. Their own trailer sat dark and plain, but Lily had been asking to put up decorations soon. Inside, Ethan turned up the electric heater while Lily changed into dry clothes. The trailer was modest but clean, with Lily's artwork brightening the walls. She settled at the small kitchen table with her coloring books, while Ethan tried to figure out the phone. The device was expensive, newer than anything he could afford. The lock screen showed no emergency contact information, just the time and those worried messages from the hospice nurse. Ethan was about to set it aside when it vibrated in his hand. A notification appeared. Message draft saved 5:42 p.m. Without meaning to, he glimpsed the words on the screen. Dad, I forgive you. I'm coming home tomorrow. Ethan stared at those words, feeling like he'd accidentally stumbled into someone's private moment of grace. The weight of that unsent message, all it might mean to the person who wrote it, to the father waiting to read it, settled over him like a heavy blanket. Are you okay, Daddy? Lily asked, looking up from her coloring. You look sad. I'm fine, sweetheart, he assured her, though his voice came out rougher than intended. Just thinking about whoever lost this phone seems like they were about to tell someone something really important. Lily set down her crayon and came to peer at the screen. Then we have to help them, right? That's what Mom would say. The simple truth in her words struck him hard. Sarah would have said exactly that, and she would have been right. Looking at his daughter's earnest face, Ethan felt something shift inside him. A reminder that even in their own struggles, they could still be part of someone else's answer to prayer. The morning sun struggled to break through heavy clouds as Ethan Cole stood in his small kitchen, stirring a cup of instant coffee. Steam rose from the chipped mug, mingling with the lingering dampness from last night's rain. The found phone sat on the counter, now plugged into his old charger, its screen occasionally lighting up with notifications he couldn't access. Is that person missing their phone a lot? Lily asked from the tiny kitchen table, spooning cereal into her mouth. Her backpack sat ready beside her chair, covered in colorful pins and badges she'd earned at church. Ethan glanced at the device. Someone important, maybe. Lily swung her legs under the table, her mismatched socks, one purple, one with yellow stripes, catching his eye. How do you know they're important? Just a feeling, sweetheart. He took another sip of coffee, grimacing at its bitter taste. The generic brand wasn't great, but it was what they could afford this month. After Lily finished her breakfast, she rushed to the bathroom to brush her teeth. The sound of running water and her hummed rendition of Jesus Loves Me drifted through their small trailer. Ethan picked up the phone, now fully charged, and studied its sleek surface. It was the kind of phone he could never afford, probably worth more than what he made in 2 weeks. With Lily occupied, he opened his ancient laptop, A1, hand-me-down from the church's donation drive. The fan whirred loudly as he typed Maggie Harlow into the search bar, the name he'd glimpsed in the phone's email notifications. His eyebrows rose as the results loaded. There she was, Maggie Harlow, CEO of Harlow Innovations. The website showed a professional headshot of a woman in her late 30s, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing a crisp blazer. Her expression was confident, but something in her eyes seemed distant, almost sad. Harlow Innovations leads tech revolution. One headline read. Another article detailed the company's latest product launch, with Maggie Harlow quoted discussing artificial intelligence and market projections. The company headquarters was in Indianapolis, about 2 hours away. Dad, have you seen my science homework? Lily called from her room, interrupting his research. Check under your bed, honey. That's where it was last time. He heard her shuffling around, followed by a triumphant, found it. Ethan rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the shipping rates to Indianapolis on another tab. The secure shipping would cost more than he had in his checking account. He could mail it regular post, but if anything happened to it, a phone like this probably had sensitive company information. What if they thought he'd stolen it? The morning passed in its usual rush, making Lily's lunch, double-checking her homework, and walking her to the bus stop. The whole time, that phone weighed on his mind like a brick in his pocket. Back in the trailer, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with his work schedule spread out before him. He had 3 jobs lined up for the day, fixing Mrs. Henderson's leaky roof, helping Mr. Peterson clean out his garage, and an evening shift at the grocery store. But that unsent message kept nagging at him. The hours ticked by as he worked. The November wind bit through his jacket as he patched Mrs. Henderson's roof. She paid him with a $20 bill and a container of homemade soup. At Mr. Peterson's, he sorted through decades of accumulated stuff, earning enough to put gas in the truck. By the time he got to his grocery store shift, his muscles ached, but his mind was made up. That evening, after tucking Lily into bed with a story and a prayer, Ethan sat in the living room's lone armchair. The phone screen glowed in the darkness as he pulled up the unsent message again. Dad, I forgive you. I'm coming home tomorrow. Who were you forgiving, Maggie? He whispered to the empty room. The words felt heavy with unspoken pain, reminding him of his own unresolved grief over losing Sarah, Lily's mother. Tomorrow was Saturday. No school for Lily meant she could stay with Mrs. Henderson, who was always happy to have her help bake cookies. He'd drive to Indianapolis first thing in the morning. It would eat up most of his gas money, but something about that message told him this phone needed to be handed back in person. Ethan checked his schedule one more time. If he left early enough, he could make it to Indianapolis and back before his evening shift at the grocery store. It would be tight, but he'd manage. He always did. He mapped the route to Harlow Innovations on his laptop, memorizing the turns since his truck's GPS hadn't worked in years. The building looked impressive in the photos, all glass and steel, rising high above the Indianapolis skyline. It was a world away from his life in Greenwood, but tomorrow he'd bridge that gap, if only for a moment. As he got ready for bed, Ethan moved quietly past Lily's room, where her nightlight cast star-shaped patterns on the wall. Through the crack in her door, he could see her favorite stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm, her face peaceful in sleep. Looking at her reminded him why he worked so hard, why every dollar and every hour mattered. The phone sat on his nightstand, its presence both mysterious and demanding. In the morning, he would drive those 2 hours to return it to its owner, not knowing how this simple act of kindness might change everything. The morning kitchen was quiet except for the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the rustle of paper bags. Ethan carefully folded the top of Lily's brown lunch bag, tucking in a small note like he did every day. The familiar routine brought comfort as sunrise painted the kitchen walls in soft amber. "Dad, where's my purple hair tie?" Lily called from her bedroom, her voice muffled through the thin walls of their trailer. "Check the bathroom counter, sweetheart," Ethan replied, adding an extra cookie to her lunch. Sarah used to do the same thing, a little surprised to brighten their daughter's day. Aunt May's familiar knock echoed through the trailer, 3 quick taps followed by 2 slow ones. She bustled in wearing her usual flowered sweater, bringing with her the scent of fresh-baked muffins. "There's my favorite niece." May's warm voice filled the small space as Lily ran to hug her. "And there's my favorite brother," looking worried as usual. Ethan managed a small smile. "Thanks for watching her today, May." "I wouldn't ask, but—" "Oh, hush." May waved away his thanks. "You do the same for me. Besides, Lily and I have big plans, don't we, sweetie?" Lily bounced excitedly. "We're making Christmas ornaments." "That's right." May's eyes met Ethan's. "You just do what you need to do. We'll be fine here." Ethan knelt down to Lily's level, straightening her backpack straps. "Be good for Aunt May, okay? I'll be back before bedtime. Promise?" Lily's small fingers played with the zipper of her jacket. "Promise." He pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "I love you to the moon and back, and to all the stars." Lily finished their familiar exchange. After helping Lily into May's car for school, Ethan loaded a few essential tools into his old pickup, just in case. The found phone sat heavy in his jacket pocket, its presence a constant reminder of his mission. The highway stretched before him as he headed toward Indianapolis, his truck's worn engine humming steadily. Traffic thinned as he left Greenwood behind, and his mind wandered to Sarah. She would have approved of this journey, he knew. Her voice seemed to float through his memory, clear as yesterday. "Honesty always pays back in ways you can't see, Ethan." It had been her mantra, even during the hardest times, like when he'd lost his construction company job and wanted to hide it from her. She'd known something was wrong the moment he walked in the door. "Truth first," she'd said, taking his hand. "We'll figure out the rest together." The memory brought a familiar ache to his chest. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, watching the mile markers slip by. Halfway to Indianapolis, the truck's engine made an ominous coughing sound. The temperature gauge crept toward red, and steam began seeping from under the hood. "No, no, no," Ethan muttered, carefully pulling onto the shoulder. Other cars whizzed past as he popped the hood, releasing a cloud of steam. The sight of the aging engine brought a wave of worry. He couldn't afford major repairs right now. Standing there on the highway shoulder, Ethan closed his eyes. "Lord," he whispered, "I know I haven't talked to you much lately, but I could use some help here, please." The prayer felt rusty on his lips, but somehow familiar, like trying on an old coat you'd forgotten about. He checked the coolant tank, finding it nearly empty. Thankfully, he had some spare coolant in his toolkit. As he filled the tank, his hands remembered Sarah's touch the last time they'd worked on the truck together. She'd insisted on learning basic maintenance, claiming it was quality time. Her laugh had echoed across their old driveway as she accidentally sprayed herself with windshield washer fluid. The engine started on the second try, settling into its usual rhythm. Ethan patted the dashboard gratefully. "Just a little further, old girl." The rest of the drive passed without incident, but as Indianapolis's skyline appeared on the horizon, doubt began creeping in. What was he doing here, really? A man in worn work boots and yesterday's jacket, carrying a CEO's phone? The Harlow Innovations building rose before him like a giant mirror, its glass surfaces reflecting the cloudy afternoon sky. Ethan parked in the visitor's lot, suddenly very aware of his truck's rusty bumper and peeling paint job among the shiny luxury vehicles. Inside his jacket pocket, the phone seemed to grow heavier. That unsent message played in his mind. "Dad, I forgive you. I'm coming home tomorrow." Someone's private moment of grace. Interrupted. He had to return it. Taking a deep breath, Ethan stepped out of his truck and walked toward the building's entrance. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh, revealing a vast marble lobby. His work boots squeaked against the polished floor, drawing sharp glances from two security guards stationed behind a sleek desk. Their crisp uniforms and suspicious stares made Ethan feel every bit the outsider he was. One guard's hand drifted toward his radio as Ethan approached, while the other straightened to his full height. The reception area of Harlow Innovations felt like another world compared to Ethan's usual surroundings. Chrome and glass stretched in every direction, while modern art pieces hung on pristine white walls. His work-worn reflection stared back at him from the polished marble floor, making him increasingly aware of his mud-speckled boots and weathered jacket. The receptionist, a young woman with perfectly styled hair, kept glancing up from her computer screen with poorly concealed concern. Ethan held the phone carefully wrapped in a paper towel, not wanting his fingerprints to smudge its expensive surface. His calloused hands felt too rough for such a delicate piece of technology. "Miss Harlow is currently in a board meeting," the receptionist said for the third time, her manicured fingers hovering over her keyboard. "Perhaps I could take a message?" "I'll wait," Ethan replied quietly, settling deeper into the sleek leather chair that probably cost more than his monthly rent. "It's important." The wall clock ticked away 15 minutes before raised voices erupted from behind the frosted glass doors. They burst open, and a stream of men and women in expensive suits filed out, their faces pinched with stress. Behind them strode Maggie Harlow herself. She was exactly as her online photos had shown. Tall, commanding, with dark hair pulled back severely from her face. Her charcoal suit was immaculate, but there were shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. She was speaking rapidly into her tablet. "Tell legal we need those contracts revised by end of day. And someone get me my phone. I can't believe I lost it at that gas station in Miss Harlow." Ethan stood, clearing his throat. "I believe this belongs to you." She barely glanced his way. "Leave it with reception. I assume you're from the courier service?" "No, ma'am." Ethan stepped forward, still holding the wrapped phone. "I found this at Miller's gas station in Greenwood. I saw the message about your father and thought." Maggie froze mid-stride. The tablet lowered slowly as she turned to face him fully, her expression shifting from dismissive to sharp attention. "What message?" The reception area had grown eerily quiet. Even the receptionist had stopped typing. "There was an unsent draft," Ethan explained carefully, noting how Maggie's shoulders had tensed. "About forgiveness, about coming home." Color drained from Maggie's face. She reached for the phone with slightly trembling hands, though her voice remained steady. "Thank you for bringing this to me personally. That was unexpectedly kind." "It seemed important," Ethan said simply. "Sometimes messages like that shouldn't wait." Maggie's fingers moved swiftly across the screen, presumably finding the draft. Her professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something raw and painful underneath. She blinked rapidly, then straightened her spine. "You drove all the way from Greenwood to return this?" "Yes, ma'am. My truck barely made it, but—" "You're a mechanic?" she interrupted, studying him with new interest. "Construction foreman, originally. These days I do whatever work I can find. Odd jobs, repairs, that sort of thing." Something flickered in Maggie's eyes. Calculation, perhaps, or possibility. She glanced down at the phone again, then back at him. "Do you have experience with old houses? Historic properties?" "Yes, ma'am. Worked on plenty of them over the years." She seemed to be making a rapid series of decisions. "My father's farmhouse. It's just outside Greenwood, actually. The property needs significant work before winter sets in. The roof is questionable, the pipes are ancient, and there's probably water damage I haven't even discovered yet." Ethan waited, sensing there was more to come. "I've been meaning to hire someone to assess and repair it, but finding reliable help has been—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Challenging. Would you be interested in a temporary position? The pay would be fair, of course." The offer hung in the air between them. Ethan thought of his dwindling savings, of Lily's upcoming school expenses, of the repairs his truck desperately needed. But more than that, he thought of the pain he'd glimpsed beneath Maggie's composed exterior, pain that reminded him of his own. "I could take a look," he said carefully. "Make you a list of what needs doing, give you an estimate of time and materials." "Good." Maggie reached into her suit jacket and produced a business card. "Call this number tomorrow. We'll discuss details." She hesitated, then added more quietly, "Thank you, not just for the phone, for bringing that message to my attention." Ethan accepted the card, nodding simply. "Sometimes we need reminders about the important things, Ms. Harlow, even if they're hard to face." For a moment, something almost like vulnerability crossed Maggie's face. Then she was all business again, checking her recovered phone. "I have another meeting. My assistant will be in touch about the farmhouse." As she turned to leave, Ethan couldn't help feeling that Sarah had been right after all. Honesty did have a way of paying back in unexpected ways. Perhaps this job was exactly the blessing they'd been needing. The receptionist was staring at him with undisguised curiosity as he headed for the elevator. His boots still squeaked against the marble floor, but somehow he didn't feel quite as out of place as before. Sometimes, he thought, God worked in mysterious ways, even through lost phones and unsent messages. The morning sun painted long shadows across the country road as Ethan's pickup truck rumbled toward the Harlow farmhouse. Lily pressed her face against the passenger window, her breath fogging the glass as she watched the landscape change from suburban streets to open fields dotted with trees ablaze in autumn colors. "Dad, look at all the leaves!" Lily pointed excitedly at the golden maples lining the gravel driveway. "They're like nature's confetti." Ethan smiled at his daughter's enthusiasm as he pulled up to the old farmhouse. The two-story structure stood proud despite its obvious neglect. Peeling white paint, loose shutters, and missing shingles told the story of years without care. Morning dew sparkled on the overgrown grass, and fallen leaves carpeted the yard in shades of amber and crimson. "Remember what we talked about, honey?" Ethan asked as he put the truck in park. "This is a work site, so you need to be careful." Lily nodded solemnly. "I know, Dad. I brought my drawing pad and colored pencils. I can sit on the porch and draw while you work." The crunch of tires on gravel announced another arrival. A sleek black Tesla pulled up beside Ethan's weathered truck, the contrast between the vehicles as stark as day and night. Maggie Harlow stepped out, dressed in crisp business casual rather than the formal suit from yesterday. Despite the more relaxed attire, her posture remained rigid, her movements precise. "Good morning, Mr. Cole," she said, her tone professional but not unkind. Her eyes softened slightly when she noticed Lily. "And you must be Lily. I hope you don't mind keeping your father company today." "Nice to meet you, Miss Harlow," Lily chirped, offering her hand just as Ethan had taught her. "Your house looks like it has lots of stories to tell." Something flickered across Maggie's face. Surprise, perhaps, or a hint of warmth. Before her composed expression returned. "Yes, I suppose it does." She turned to Ethan, all business again. "I've had the utilities turned back on. There's a key under the mat, and I've left a list of priority repairs on the kitchen counter." Ethan nodded, already mentally cataloging the visible issues. "I'll do a thorough inspection first, make sure we catch any underlying problems." While Ethan retrieved his tools from the truck, Lily had already bounded up the creaky porch steps, her curiosity evident in every movement. Maggie watched her with an unreadable expression, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Inside, the house smelled of dust and memories. Sheets covered most of the furniture, creating ghost-like shapes in the dim light. Ethan pulled out his flashlight and began examining the walls for water damage, while Lily settled herself in a patch of sunlight streaming through the bay window. "The electrical needs updating," Ethan muttered, making notes on his phone. "And that foundation crack in the northeast corner needs attention before winter." His voice trailed off as he heard Lily's excited gasp from the living room. "Miss Harlow, is this you?" she called out. Maggie, who had been standing in the doorway, checking emails, looked up sharply. She walked over to where Lily stood by the fireplace, holding a dusty silver frame she'd found on the mantel. The photo showed a young girl with Maggie's dark hair, sitting on a man's shoulders at what appeared to be a county fair. Both were laughing, cotton candy in hand, joy radiating from their faces. The silence in the room grew thick. Ethan watched as Maggie's carefully maintained facade cracked ever so slightly. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the frame, but she didn't take it from Lily's hands. "Yes," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's me, and my father. She swallowed hard, then added, Would you mind putting it back on the mantel, please? Lily nodded, sensing the weight of the moment. She carefully placed the photo back where she'd found it, adjusting it just so. Ethan recognized the grief in Maggie's eyes. It was the same kind he saw in his own reflection some mornings. I should get back to the office, Maggie said abruptly, her professional mask sliding back into place. Please lock up when you're finished for the day, Mr. Cole. I'll transfer the first payment tonight. She walked quickly to her car, her heels clicking against the wooden porch. Ethan and Lily watched through the window as she sat in her Tesla, presumably preparing to leave. But before she could start the engine, her phone lit up with an incoming call. Even from a distance, they could see the change in her posture as she answered. Her shoulders stiffened, then collapsed. One hand flew to her mouth, and her head bowed forward. Though they couldn't hear anything through the car's windows, they could see her body shaking with sobs. Ethan instinctively took a step toward the door, but stopped himself. Some grief needed to be private. He knew that better than most. He gently guided Lily away from the window instead. Come on, sweetheart, let's give Miss Harlow some space. He squeezed her shoulder gently. How about you set up your drawing stuff on the back porch? The view of the maple trees is pretty nice back there. As they moved toward the back of the house, Lily asked quietly, Dad, is Miss Harlow sad like you were when Mom died? Ethan paused, choosing his words carefully. Everyone's sadness is different, honey. But yes, I think Miss Harlow is dealing with something very hard right now. Through the back window, they could see Maggie's car still parked in front of the house, its occupant hidden behind tinted glass and private grief. The autumn wind whistled through the old house's bones, stirring up leaves and memories alike. Morning frost coated the farmhouse windows like delicate lace. Ethan arrived just as the sun began warming the earth, his work boots crunching on fallen leaves. The old house stood silent against the pale sky, its weathered siding telling stories of decades gone by. He unlocked the front door with the key Maggie had given him yesterday, the hinges creaking, but in protest. The empty rooms echoed his footsteps as he made his way to where he'd left his tools. Lily wouldn't join him today. She was at school, probably drawing pictures during math class again. Ethan knelt beside the living room floor, running his calloused hand over the worn wooden boards. Years of neglect had left them dull and scratched. He pulled out his electric sander and protective mask, ready to begin the day's work. Through the quiet morning, a car's tires crunched on the gravel driveway. Ethan glanced out the window to see Maggie's black luxury sedan parked at an odd angle, as if she'd pulled in hastily. She remained inside, phone pressed to her ear, her free hand moving in sharp gestures. Even through the closed windows, her raised voice carried. No, I won't have the service there. He hasn't stepped foot in that church for 20 years. I don't care what people expect. Ethan turned on the sander, drowning out her words. Some conversations weren't meant to be overheard. The machine's steady vibration traveled up his arms as he worked, smoothing away years of scratches and water stains. Dust filled the air, dancing in the streams of sunlight that filtered through the windows. An hour passed before the front door opened again. Maggie's heels clicked against the floor as she entered, her designer suit a stark contrast to the rustic surroundings. Her face was composed, but her eyes were rimmed with red. Mr. Cole, she said, her voice clipped. How are the repairs progressing? Ethan straightened up, wiping sawdust from his hands. Coming along well. The floors should be ready for staining by tomorrow. Good. She walked to the window, arms crossed tightly across her chest. Miss Harlow, Ethan said softly, I heard about your father. I'm very sorry for your loss. Maggie's shoulders stiffened. She whirled around, eyes flashing. I don't need your sympathy, Mr. Cole. Just do the job I'm paying you for. The words hung sharp in the air between them. Before Ethan could respond, the screen door banged open. Lily burst in, her backpack bouncing against her back. Daddy, Aunt May dropped me off early because she stopped short, noticing Maggie. Oh, hi, Miss Harlow. I made something for you at school today. Maggie's face remained stern, but something softened almost imperceptibly around her eyes. Did you? Lily dropped her backpack and dug through it, pulling out a slightly crumpled piece of construction paper. She smoothed it carefully before holding it out to Maggie. The drawing showed a simple house with a figure standing on a cloud above it. Rainbow-colored hearts floated around the scene, and at the top in careful child's writing were the words, He's in heaven now. Maggie's hands trembled as she took the paper. She stared at it for a long moment, her carefully maintained composure cracking like thin ice. A tear splashed onto the drawing, followed by another. Thank you, Lily. she whispered, her voice rough. This is very kind. Lily stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Maggie's waist in a tight hug. The gesture seemed to break something loose inside the woman, and she covered her face with one hand, still clutching the drawing in the other. Ethan guided Lily gently away. "Why don't you go set up your homework at the kitchen table, sweetheart? I brought your books." Once Lily was out of the room, Maggie took a shuddering breath. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping her eyes. "I shouldn't have snapped at you earlier." "No need to apologize," Ethan replied quietly. "Grief has its own timeline." Maggie nodded, carefully folding Lily's drawing and slipping it into her purse. Without another word, she walked out, her heels clicking more slowly now against the wooden floors. Later that night, back in their trailer, Ethan tucked Lily into bed. Her Star Wars sheets were worn but clean, just like everything else they owned. "Daddy?" Lily asked, hugging her stuffed giraffe close. "Was Miss Harlow crying because of her dad?" "Yes, sweetheart." Ethan smoothed her hair back from her forehead. "She's very sad right now. Like we were when Mommy died?" "Something like that." He was quiet for a moment. "You know, sometimes people break before they can heal. Like when I fix a broken chair. Sometimes I have to take it all apart before I can put it back together stronger." Lily nodded thoughtfully. "I hope Miss Harlow feels better soon." Across town, in a modern apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows, Maggie sat alone on her leather couch. Her phone glowed in the darkness as she opened the unsent draft message one more time. "Dad, I forgive you. I'm coming home tomorrow." The words blurred as fresh tears filled her eyes. She'd never hit send. Now she never could. A week of November rain had stripped the trees bare, leaving the farmhouse exposed against the gray sky. Ethan worked steadily, replacing rotted boards on the front porch while his mind wandered to the funeral he'd attended 3 days ago. He hadn't planned to go, but Lily had insisted they should be there for Miss Maggie. The crunch of tires on gravel pulled his attention to the driveway. Maggie's black sedan rolled to a stop, and she emerged wearing a simple sweater and jeans instead of her usual business attire. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but there was a determined set to her jaw that hadn't been there before. "Good morning," Ethan said, setting down his hammer. "Didn't expect to see you today. I needed to get out of the office." Maggie's voice was rough, like she hadn't used it much lately. She climbed the porch steps, careful to avoid the areas still under repair. "The house is looking better." Little by little, Ethan nodded. "Lily's inside, organizing that box of old photos we found in the attic. Hope that's okay." A flash of pain crossed Maggie's face, but she nodded. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something. Do you have a minute?" They sat on the sturdy section of the porch, the autumn wind rustling dead leaves across the yard. Maggie stared at her hands, twisting an old ring on her finger that Ethan hadn't noticed before. "The board made me CEO," she said finally. "It was in Dad's will. He left me everything. The company, this house, all of it." Her voice cracked. "I don't deserve any of it." "Why would you say that?" Maggie let out a bitter laugh. "Because I spent the last 5 years fighting him on every decision he made. Because I thought I knew better." She pulled her knees to her chest, looking suddenly young and vulnerable. "And now there's this mess at the company. Someone leaked internal hiring data showing possible discrimination. The media's having a field day, calling us hypocrites." "Is it true?" Ethan asked quietly. "I don't know. Maybe. We grew so fast, and I was so focused on profits." She trailed off, shaking her head. "Dad always said success without integrity is failure in disguise. He built that company on fairness and trust, and somewhere along the way, we lost sight of that." Through the window, they could hear Lily humming as she sorted through old photographs. The sound seemed to soften something in Maggie's expression. "I found one of his old journals last night," she continued. "He wrote about every major decision he made, always asking himself if it served people first and profits second." She pulled a worn leather notebook from her bag. There was this quote he kept coming back to: "Character shines brightest when no one claps." "Sounds like a wise man," Ethan said. "He was." Maggie's voice wavered, and I was too stubborn to see it until it was too late. "Now I have to fix this mess, and I don't even know where to start." Ethan thought for a moment, remembering his own struggles after losing Sarah. "Sometimes," he said carefully, "the hardest part isn't knowing what to do. It's forgiving yourself enough to try." Maggie looked at him sharply, then away. "How do you do that?" "Forgive yourself, one day at a time, and with a lot of help." He gestured toward the window where Lily was visible, still sorting photos. She taught me that. They sat in comfortable silence until the sun began to set, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples. Maggie stood, brushing off her jeans. I should go. There's a board meeting tomorrow morning. She hesitated. Thank you, Ethan, for listening and for coming to the funeral. It meant a lot. That was all Lily's doing, he smiled. She's got a good heart. As Maggie walked to her car, the front door burst open and Lily ran out onto the porch. Miss Maggie, wait. Maggie turned and Lily bounded down the steps, clutching something in her hands. I found this picture of you and your dad. You were riding horses. She held out a faded photograph showing a younger Maggie on horseback, her father leading the horse with a proud smile. Maggie's hands trembled slightly as she took the photo. I remember this day, she whispered. I was so scared, but Dad wouldn't let go until I was ready. Don't be sad, Miss Maggie, Lily called out as Maggie headed toward her car. God's still got a plan. Maggie paused, her hand on the car door. For the first time since her father's death, a small smile lifted the corners of her mouth. It was faint, barely there, but it reached her eyes. As they watched her drive away, Ethan wrapped an arm around his daughter's shoulders. The last rays of sunlight caught the old farmhouse windows, making them glow like amber. He couldn't shake the feeling that finding Maggie's phone that rainy night hadn't been an accident, that somehow their broken pieces were meant to help each other heal. Can we pray for Miss Maggie tonight? Lily asked, leaning against him. Of course we can, sweetheart. Ethan looked down at his work-worn hands, thinking about character and second chances. I think we all could use a little prayer right now. The morning sun struggled through patchy clouds as Ethan climbed the rickety ladder to the farmhouse roof. His tool belt clinked with each step, and his breath made little clouds in the chilly air. He'd been dreading this part of the repairs. The shingles were in worse shape than he'd first thought. The crunch of tires on gravel made him pause. A sleek black car pulled up, and Maggie stepped out, juggling a cardboard tray of coffee cups and a thick roll of blueprints under her arm. She looked different today, her usual crisp business suit replaced by jeans and a warm sweater. Thought you might need this, she called up, holding the coffee tray. It's getting colder. Ethan carefully made his way down. Thanks. Didn't expect to see you here today. He accepted the cup gratefully, letting the warmth seep into his calloused hands. Maggie spread the blueprints across the hood of her car. Found these in Dad's study last night. Look at this. Her finger traced lines on the paper. He had plans drawn up to turn this place into a community center, senior housing on one side, daycare on the other. He wanted to give back to the town. Ethan studied the drawings. Your father had a big heart. Did he? Maggie's voice carried an edge. Sometimes I wonder if this was just his way of making up for. She stopped herself, taking a long sip of coffee. They walked around to the back porch, where worn wooden chairs waited. Maggie sat, her shoulders tight with tension. You know what's strange? I keep finding pieces of who he really was, now that he's gone. Things I never saw before. Ethan nodded, understanding in his eyes. Grief does that. Makes you see things differently. He paused, then added softly, when Sarah, my wife, passed, I found her garden journal. She'd written about every flower she planted, what they meant, which ones were Lily's favorites. Maggie turned to him, really looking at him for the first time. I didn't know you were widowed. How long ago? 3 years. Ethan's voice grew quiet. Cancer. We? I thought we had more time, but that's not how it works, is it? No, Maggie whispered. It's not. The wind rustled through dead leaves, filling their silence. Ethan stared into his coffee cup. You know what's funny? I used to be the guy who believed everything happened for a reason. Had enough faith to move mountains, I thought. Then Sarah got sick, and suddenly all those easy answers didn't work anymore. What happened to your faith? Maggie asked, her voice gentle. Ethan shook his head. Broke, like everything else. Couldn't figure out why God would take Lily's mother, leave her growing up without. He swallowed hard. Some days I still can't pray. Just sits there like stones in my throat. Maggie was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, maybe you didn't lose it. Maybe it's waiting for you to look up again. Her words hung in the crisp air between them. Ethan looked at her, surprised by the insight. That sounds like something Sarah would have said. They spent the next few hours going over the blueprints, talking about her father's vision for the place. Maggie shared stories of childhood summers spent here, and Ethan described the repairs needed to make the dream possible. The conversation flowed easier than either expected. As the afternoon light began to fade, Lily came bouncing up the gravel drive, her backpack swinging. Aunt May had dropped her off after school. Her face lit up when she saw Maggie. "Miss Maggie, are you staying for dinner? Daddy makes the best soup on cold days." Lily's enthusiasm was contagious. Maggie started to decline, but Lily's hopeful expression made her pause. "I wouldn't want to impose. Please?" Lily clasped her hands together. "I can show you my art project. I got an A." Ethan smiled. "We'd be happy to have you. It's just vegetable soup, nothing fancy, but there's plenty." Maggie hesitated, then surrendered to Lily's eager face. "All right, thank you." Their small trailer was warm and welcoming after the chill outside. Lily proudly showed Maggie her artwork while Ethan heated the soup. The kitchen filled with the aroma of herbs and vegetables, and something else, the comfort of shared space. Maggie watched as Ethan and Lily moved around each other with practiced ease, setting the table, Lily carefully carrying spoons, Ethan pulling warm bread from the oven. It was so different from her quiet apartment, her solitary meals. "Would you like to say grace?" Lily asked Maggie, reaching for her hand. Caught off guard, Maggie felt tears prick her eyes. She couldn't remember the last time she'd prayed, but Lily's small hand was warm in hers, and Ethan's quiet strength across the table steadied her. "Dear God," she began hesitantly, "thank you for this food, for warm soup on cold days, and for," her voice wavered slightly, "for new friends who share their table. Amen." "Amen," Lily echoed cheerfully, diving into her soup. The conversation flowed naturally. Lily's school day, funny stories about construction mishaps, memories of other family dinners. Maggie found herself laughing more than she had in months, maybe years. The simple meal in this modest trailer felt more like home than any expensive restaurant she'd ever visited. As they finished their soup, Lily's eyes grew heavy. She yawned, making Maggie smile. The clock showed it was later than she'd realized. "I should go," Maggie said, standing. "Thank you for dinner." It was. She searched for words that wouldn't sound hollow. It was exactly what I needed. The warmth of their small kitchen, filled with laughter and honest conversation, had awakened something in her. A hunger not for food, but for connection, for the simple grace of shared meals and open hearts. As she gathered her things to leave, Maggie realized she felt lighter somehow, as if she'd set down a burden she hadn't known she was carrying. Morning dew sparkled on the overgrown grass as Ethan, Lily, and Maggie walked through the farmhouse garden. The November air was crisp, but not too cold, perfect for planting the winter flowers Lily had begged to buy at the garden store. She skipped ahead of them, clutching a paper bag full of seed packets. "The garden used to be beautiful," Maggie said softly, gesturing to the weathered wooden planters and tangled rose bushes. "Mom spent every weekend out here before she passed. Dad tried to keep it up for a while, but she trailed off, wrapping her arms around herself." Ethan nodded, understanding the weight of those unfinished sentences. Gardens need love to grow. Sometimes we're not ready to give it. Lily had already found a sunny spot near the old oak tree. She knelt in the dirt, carefully arranging her seed packets like precious treasures. "Can we plant these here, Miss Maggie? The tag says they like sunshine." Maggie walked over and crouched beside her, her expensive wool coat brushing the ground. "What are you planting, sweetheart?" "Winter pansies and something called snapdragons." Lily held up the packets. "They're tough flowers that can handle the cold, like you and Daddy." She began digging small holes with her plastic trowel. "Some are for my mommy in heaven, and some are for your daddy too, so they can both have pretty flowers to look at." Maggie's breath caught. She blinked rapidly, touching the soil with trembling fingers. Ethan watched as she slipped off her heels, set them aside, and joined Lily in the dirt. "That's very thoughtful of you, Lily," Maggie said, her voice gentle. "I think they'd both love that." For the next hour, they worked together in the garden. Ethan cleared away dead branches while Maggie and Lily planted flowers. The simple act seemed to transform Maggie. Her usual sharp edges softened, her corporate armor falling away as she helped Lily pat soil over tiny seeds. "Want to see the inside progress?" Ethan asked when they finished. "We got most of the living room painted yesterday." Inside, the farmhouse was slowly coming back to life. Fresh paint brightened the walls, and the restored hardwood floors gleamed in the morning light. But one of the pocket doors leading to the dining room stuck halfway, its hinges protesting with every movement. "That door's been stubborn since I was a kid," Maggie said, pushing at it unsuccessfully. "Nothing a little WD-40 and know-how can't fix." Ethan retrieved his toolbox. "Want to learn?" Maggie raised an eyebrow. "Me? Fix a door?" Why not? You run a tech company. This is just mechanical problem solving with a different tool set. A small smile tugged at her lips. When you put it that way, Ethan showed her how to remove the pins from the hinges, clean away decades of grime, and realign the door properly. Maggie proved to be a quick study, her natural precision serving her well. Now that's teamwork, Ethan said as they tested the smooth gliding door. I did it. Maggie's face lit up with genuine pride. I actually fixed something with my own hands. Can we paint the kitchen now? Lily asked, already eyeing the paint cans. They spent the afternoon transforming the kitchen walls from dingy beige to warm yellow. Somehow, paint ended up everywhere except where it was supposed to be. Lily giggled as she added tiny handprints to the drop cloth. Even Maggie lost her usual composure when Ethan accidentally bumped the roller against her shoulder, leaving a yellow streak across her silk blouse. Oh no, I'm so sorry, he started. But Maggie just laughed, a rich, genuine sound that filled the kitchen. She dipped her finger in the paint tray and drew a line across Ethan's cheek. Now we're even. Paint war, Lily declared, though Ethan quickly redirected her enthusiasm back to the walls. As they worked, the stories naturally emerged. Maggie shared memories of helping her mother bake cookies in this kitchen, while Ethan told them about the time he tried to make Sarah breakfast in bed and nearly burned down their first apartment. The afternoon, night was fading when they finally finished. Maggie stood in the doorway, surveying their work with satisfaction. Paint speckled her clothes and hair, but she didn't seem to mind. I forgot how much I love this place, she said quietly. Thank you both for helping bring it back to life. Later that evening, Ethan tucked Lily into bed in their small trailer. She was tired but happy, still chattering about their day. Daddy? She asked as he pulled up her covers. You're smiling again, like you used to. Ethan touched his face, surprised to find she was right. The smile felt natural, unforced, something he hadn't experienced in a long time. I guess I am, sweetheart. I like it when you smile, and when Miss Maggie smiles too. She looks pretty when she's happy. She does. Ethan agreed softly. Time for sleep now. Love you, sunshine. Love you too, Daddy. Outside the farmhouse, Maggie stood in the newly planted garden. The evening air had grown cold, but she barely noticed. Her eyes were fixed on the warmly lit windows above, where fresh paint and fixed hinges marked the beginning of something new. Thank you, Dad, she whispered to the stars. The words felt right, like the unsent message on her phone finally finding its way home. The early morning frost crunched under Maggie's heels as she hurried up the farmhouse's graveled driveway. Her normally perfect posture was slumped, and her designer coat was buttoned wrong. Ethan, who had been measuring boards for the new porch railing, immediately noticed something was off. Maggie, you're here early, he said, setting down his tape measure. The worry in her face made him step closer. What's wrong? Her hands trembled as she pulled out her phone. Everything, she whispered, her voice cracking. She handed him the device, opened to a news website. The bold headline made his stomach sink. Harlow Innovations faces discrimination scandal. CEO's leadership questioned. Ethan quickly scanned the article, his frown deepening. The story detailed allegations of racial bias in hiring practices and promotion decisions at Harlow Innovations. Former employees had come forward with claims that dated back several years, some during her father's time as CEO. They're saying we, that Dad. Maggie's composure crumbled. She sank onto the porch steps, not caring about her expensive coat touching the dusty wood. All those years he built this company on integrity, on giving people chances. And now they're painting him as... Ethan sat beside her, careful to leave space between them. The morning sun cast long shadows across the frost-covered lawn, and somewhere in the distance, a cardinal sang its morning song. My father wasn't perfect, Maggie continued, staring at her clasped hands. But he taught me that business was about more than profit. It was about building something that helped people grow. She looked up at Ethan, her eyes glistening. What if we failed? What if we didn't see what was happening in our own company? Ethan was quiet for a moment, thinking of his own struggles with faith and forgiveness. You know, he said finally, when Sarah got sick, I spent a lot of time being angry at God for not being perfect, for not saving her. But then Lily asked me something that changed everything. Maggie turned to him, waiting. She asked if I stopped loving her when she made mistakes. He smiled softly at the memory. She'd broken my favorite coffee mug that morning, trying to make me breakfast in bed. And she was so afraid I'd stop loving her because she wasn't perfect. What did you tell her? Maggie asked quietly. I told her that love isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest when we mess up and trying to do better. He gestured to the news article still glowing on her phone. People don't expect perfection, Maggie. They expect truth. She wiped her eyes carefully, considering his words. People forgive when they see truth, not perfection, she repeated, slowly. Exactly. Ethan stood up, offering her his hand. So maybe instead of hiding from these accusations, you face them head on. Show people who you really are, who your father really was. Maggie took his hand, letting him help her up. She brushed off her coat, and he could almost see the gears turning in her mind. You're right, she said, straightening her shoulders. We need to be transparent, show our community that we're listening, that we want to do better. Her fingers flew across her phone screen as she made notes. We could host an open forum, invite employees, former employees, community leaders. Really listen to their concerns and commit to making changes. That's brave, Ethan said, meaning it won't be easy. No, she agreed, looking up at him. But Dad always said the right path rarely is. She glanced around at the farmhouse, its worn boards now partially restored under Ethan's careful work. I just wish we had the right place for it. Somewhere that feels real, not some sterile conference room. Ethan gestured to the house behind them. What about here? Here? Maggie's eyes widened. Once the repairs are done, he clarified. Your father wanted this place to be a community center, right? What better way to honor that than by using it to rebuild trust with the community? For the first time that morning, a small smile crossed Maggie's face. You do that? Help me host it here? Of course, he said simply. That's what friends are for. Her smile grew a bit stronger, though her eyes were still worried. Thank you, Ethan. I think Dad would have liked that. She looked out over the frost-covered property, where the morning sun was slowly melting the white crystals into dewdrops. The cardinal was still singing somewhere in the distance, its song a reminder that even the coldest mornings eventually gave way to warmth. Yes, she said finally, let's do it here. It's time to face this honestly, just like Dad would have wanted. The farmhouse stood transformed in the crisp evening air, its windows gleaming like warm honey against the darkening sky. White Christmas lights twinkled along the newly restored wraparound porch, their glow reflecting off the fresh paint that had replaced years of weathered neglect. The scent of pine garlands mixed with fresh-baked cookies wafted through the open doors as volunteers bustled about, carrying trays of refreshments and arranging last-minute decorations. Ethan wiped his brow, taking a moment to admire how the old place had come alive again. He'd spent countless hours replacing rotted boards, fixing loose shutters, and breathing new life into every corner of the historic home. But tonight wasn't just about the building. It was about healing something deeper. Daddy, look! Lily darted past, her braids bouncing as she balanced a plate of snickerdoodles. I helped Mrs. Thompson make 3 whole batches. Her cheeks were flushed with excitement as she offered cookies to everyone she passed. Would you like one, Mr. Rodriguez? You're family now. Everybody here is family. The elderly volunteer chuckled, accepting a cookie with a warm smile. Thank you, Pequeña. People from all walks of life filled the farmhouse's restored rooms. Corporate executives in suits mingling with construction workers still in their work boots. Local business owners chatting with community leaders. The barriers that usually divided them seemed to melt away under the warm lights and shared purpose. Maggie stood near the restored fireplace, looking more relaxed than Ethan had ever seen her. Gone was her usual sharp-edged business attire, replaced by a simple blue dress that softened her features. She caught his eye across the room and smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 8, and the crowd gradually settled into chairs and along the walls. Maggie moved to the center of the room, and the quiet murmur of conversation faded to attentive silence. Thank you all for coming tonight, she began, her voice steady but touched with emotion. This farmhouse holds special meaning for me. It's where my father taught me my first lessons about business, about life, about what really matters. She paused, drawing a deep breath. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of those lessons. We all did. The room stayed silent, everyone focused on her words. Harlow Innovations was founded on the principle that technology should bring people together, not drive them apart. That success should lift everyone up, not just a select few. Her fingers brushed the restored mantelpiece, touching the spot where Lily had found that old photograph. Recent events have shown us where we fell short of those ideals. Tonight, I want to share how we're going to make things right. She outlined the company's new initiatives, expanded diversity training, revised hiring practices, and a commitment to transparency in all operations. But it was her next announcement that brought tears to several eyes. In honor of my father's memory, and inspired by some very special people in this room, her gaze flickered briefly to Ethan and Lily. We're launching the New Beginnings program. This initiative will provide job training and employment opportunities specifically for veterans and single parents, along with flexible schedules and childcare support. Applause erupted, genuine and heartfelt. Ethan felt his throat tighten as he watched Lily clapping enthusiastically beside him, her face beaming with pride. This farmhouse will serve as our community center, Maggie continued, offering classes, support groups, and a place where everyone belongs. Because that's what my father always wanted, a place where people could come together and find hope. As she finished speaking, someone started playing soft music from the restored piano in the corner. The formal presentation transformed into a casual gathering with people dancing, laughing, and sharing stories. The old farmhouse seemed to glow with newfound purpose. Lily flitted through the crowd like a happy butterfly, collecting hugs and spreading joy. "Miss Maggie," she called out, tugging at Maggie's dress. "You should dance. Daddy knows how. Mommy taught him." Maggie's eyes met Ethan's across the room, a question in their depths. He walked over, extending his hand with a gentle smile. "May I?" She slipped her hand into his, and they moved to a quiet corner where other couples swayed to the music. The string lights above cast a soft glow, making everything feel dreamlike and precious. They danced slowly, neither speaking, both aware of something delicate and new growing between them. Maggie's head gradually came to rest against Ethan's shoulder, and he could feel her relax into the movement. All around them, the farmhouse hummed with life and laughter, but in their corner, time seemed to slow down. The music wrapped around them like a gentle embrace, and in that moment, surrounded by twinkling lights and the warmth of community, hope bloomed as naturally as breathing. Sunlight streamed through the farmhouse windows, catching dust motes dancing in the air. Empty paper plates and plastic cups littered the tables, silent remnants of last night's gathering. Ethan moved methodically through the main room, his worn work boots quiet against the newly finished hardwood floors. He paused to straighten a chair, smiling at the memory of laughter and music that had filled this space just hours ago. The screen door creaked, and Maggie stepped inside, carrying 2 steaming travel mugs. Her usual sharp business attire had been replaced by faded jeans and a soft sweater. Her hair, usually perfectly styled, was pulled back in a casual ponytail. "I thought you might need this," she said, holding out one of the mugs. "It's actually decent coffee, not that instant stuff you drink." Ethan accepted it gratefully. "Hey now, don't insult my instant coffee. It's gotten me through plenty of early mornings." Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and both pretended not to notice the small spark of electricity that passed between them. Maggie quickly turned away, focusing on gathering napkins from a nearby table. "Miss Maggie!" Lily's voice rang out as she bounded down the stairs, her braids bouncing. "Look what I found upstairs." She held up a dusty photo album she discovered in one of the bedroom closets. Maggie set down her coffee and knelt beside Lily, who was already flipping through the pages. "Oh my goodness," she whispered, touching a faded photograph. "I haven't seen these in years." Ethan walked over, peering over their shoulders. The album showed a younger Maggie, maybe 7 or 8, sitting on a tire swing that still hung from the old oak tree outside. Her father stood behind her, both of them laughing at something long forgotten. "You look just like you and Daddy," Lily said, matter-of-factly, looking between Ethan and Maggie. "When you were dancing last night, it reminded me of the videos Aunt May shows me of Mommy and Daddy's wedding." Maggie's cheeks flushed pink, but something remarkable happened. She laughed. It wasn't a polite chuckle or a forced social laugh, but a genuine sound of joy that seemed to surprise even her. The sound filled the room like sunshine, and Ethan found himself staring, transfixed by this new side of her. "Oh, Lily," Maggie said, still smiling, "you certainly have a way with words." "Daddy says I got that from Mommy," Lily replied proudly, then skipped off to explore another corner of the house. Ethan and Maggie shared a look, both still warm from Lily's innocent observation. "Kids," Ethan said softly, shaking his head, "they just say what they see, don't they?" "It's refreshing," Maggie admitted, closing the photo album carefully. "I can't remember the last time I laughed like that. Really laughed, I mean." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, gathering trash and straightening furniture. The morning light grew stronger, casting long shadows across the floor. Through the windows, they could see the pond glittering in the distance. "Want to take a break?" Maggie suggested, nodding toward the door. "The pond looks beautiful this morning." Ethan checked his watch, then glanced at Lily, who was contentedly drawing at the kitchen table. "Hey, sweetheart, want to stay here and finish your masterpiece while Miss Maggie and I take a quick walk?" "Uh-huh," Lily nodded, not looking up from her artwork. "I'm drawing the farmhouse with all the pretty lights, like last night." The air was crisp as they walked toward the pond, their breaths forming small clouds in the morning chill. Fallen leaves crunched beneath their feet, creating a peaceful rhythm to their steps. "You know," Ethan said, breaking the comfortable silence, "I never thought I'd be here." "At my father's farmhouse?" Maggie asked. "No, I mean." He paused, searching for the right words. "Here, feeling this way again. After Sarah died, I thought that was it for me. Just me and Lily, getting by day to day." Maggie's steps slowed. "And now?" "Now?" Ethan looked out across the pond's surface, where a family of ducks glided peacefully. "Now I'm starting to believe in miracles again. Small ones, maybe, but still miracles. Like finding a phone in a puddle?" Maggie's voice was soft, vulnerable. "Like finding hope in unexpected places," he corrected gently. "You know, Sarah used to say that God works in mysterious ways. I stopped believing that for a while, but lately?" They reached the pond's edge, where a wooden bench sat weathered but sturdy. Maggie ran her hand along its worn surface. "Dad built this bench the summer I turned 12, she said. "He said everyone needs a quiet place to think." They sat together, watching the ripples on the water. The morning sun had grown warmer, and somewhere in the distance, a cardinal called out. "I used to be so angry with him," Maggie continued, her voice barely above a whisper, "for working so much, for the mistakes he made with the company, for not being there when Mom died. But now," she shook her head, "now I just wish I'd sent that message sooner." Ethan nodded, understanding the weight of words left unsaid. Sometimes the hardest part of second chances is forgiving ourselves for needing them in the first place. They walked back to the farmhouse, where Lily was waiting with her completed drawing. It showed the farmhouse lit up with twinkling lights, and 3 figures standing on the porch, one tall man, one woman, and a small girl between them, all holding hands. Later that evening, in her car parked outside her downtown apartment, Maggie pulled out her phone. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she started typing a message to Ethan. "Today made me realize." She stared at the words for a long moment before deleting them. "Maybe someday," she whispered to herself, putting the phone away. The memory of his smile, of Lily's laughter, of the peaceful morning by the pond, these she kept close to her heart, like precious photographs in an album all their own. The morning sun struggled against the thick blanket of storm clouds that had rolled in overnight, casting the farmhouse in an eerie gray light. The air felt heavy with moisture and tension, as if nature itself sensed the upheaval about to unfold. Workers had arrived early as usual, their voices carrying across the property as they discussed the day's tasks. The sound of hammers and saws had already begun their familiar rhythm when a sleek black sedan came roaring up the winding gravel driveway, its tires spitting stones in every direction. The car's engine died with an aggressive slam of the door, and Maggie emerged like a storm given human form. Her usually perfect composure had cracked, revealing something wild and wounded underneath. She strode toward the farmhouse with sharp, determined steps, her designer heels clicking against the wooden porch boards like gunshots. Her face was flushed red with anger, and her normally steady hands trembled as she clutched her phone so tightly her knuckles had gone white. "Everyone out," she commanded, her voice slicing through the peaceful morning air like a blade. The sharp edge in her tone made every worker freeze mid-motion. Tools stopped mid-swing, conversations died in throats, and all eyes turned toward the woman who looked ready to tear the world apart with her bare hands. I said, "Out, now." The workers exchanged bewildered glances, their faces painted with confusion and growing concern. They had never seen their usually controlled boss look so unhinged. Without a word, they quickly gathered their belongings, moving with the urgent efficiency of people who recognized danger when they saw it. Tools clattered into boxes, lunch containers were hastily grabbed, and within moments, they were filing out through the front door, casting worried looks over their shoulders. Inside the farmhouse, Ethan looked up from where he knelt on the hardwood floor, carefully measuring and cutting new baseboards. His weathered hands paused on his level, confusion creasing his brow as he registered the chaos outside. Dust motes danced in the weak sunlight streaming through the windows, and the scent of fresh wood shavings filled the air around his work area. Lily sat cross-legged on a blanket nearby, her small tongue poking out in concentration as she worked on a drawing in her favorite notebook. She had chosen this spot specifically to be close to her father while he worked. something that had become their cherished routine over the past weeks. Her crayons were scattered around her like colorful confetti, and she hummed softly to herself, completely absorbed in creating what looked like a picture of the farmhouse surrounded by blooming flowers. The front door slammed with such force that the windows rattled, causing Lily to look up with wide, startled eyes. Maggie's footsteps echoed through the empty house like thunder, each heel strike sharp and purposeful against the polished floors. When Maggie appeared in the doorway of the room where they worked, her eyes immediately locked onto Ethan with the intensity of a laser. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, and her perfectly styled hair looked slightly disheveled, as if she had been running her hands through it during the drive over. The professional mask she usually wore had completely shattered, revealing raw pain and fury that seemed to radiate from her like heat from a fire. "How dare you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible but carrying the weight of absolute betrayal. Then her volume exploded. "How dare you do this to me? How dare you use me like this?" Ethan's confusion deepened, and he slowly rose to his feet, setting his tools carefully aside on the small table he had improvised from sawhorses and plywood. His movements were deliberate and gentle, the way someone might move around a wounded animal. "Maggie, what's wrong?" His voice carried genuine concern, but also a growing alarm at the wild look in her eyes. "I don't understand what's happened. Please, just tell me, don't." She held up one trembling hand, stopping him mid-sentence. With her other hand, she thrust her phone toward him, the screen glowing with an article that made Ethan's blood run cold. "Don't you dare pretend you don't know." The headline screamed across the top of the screen in bold, sensational letters. Harlow Innovations, CEO's private messages leaked. Sources claim maintenance worker accessed personal data during property renovation. Below it was a smaller subheading that made Ethan's stomach drop. Exclusive, final messages to dying father reveal family tensions and corporate secrets. The color drained from Ethan's face so quickly that he had to steady himself against the wall. His eyes scanned the article, each word hitting him like a physical blow. "That's not true," he said, his voice firm despite the slight tremor that betrayed his shock. "Maggie, I swear to you, I would never." "Save it," she cut him off, her voice now sharp enough to cut glass. The professional executive had returned. But underneath lurked something far more dangerous, a woman whose deepest wounds had been torn open and exposed to the world. Just save your lies for someone stupid enough to believe them. Her hands shook as she pulled the phone back, scrolling through the article. The reporter quotes the exact message I was trying to send to my father that night. Word for word, Ethan. "The message you saw when you found my phone in the kitchen? Only you and I knew about that conversation." Lily's crayon had stopped moving across the paper, and she looked up at the adults with growing worry, creasing her young features. The happiness that usually brightened her face had been replaced by confusion and fear. "Daddy wouldn't do that, Miss Maggie," she said in a small voice that carried absolute certainty. "He always tells me that lying is wrong. He says honest people sleep better at night." Something flickered across Maggie's face, a moment of softness at Lily's innocent faith, but it was quickly replaced by bitter cynicism. "Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who hurt us the deepest, sweetie," she said, her voice carrying years of accumulated pain. "Sometimes people we think are good turn out to be just like everyone else." She turned back to Ethan, and the hurt in her eyes was so raw, it was almost unbearable to witness. "Was this your plan all along? Get close to the grieving daughter, earn her trust, then sell her secrets to the highest bidder? Tell me, how much did they pay you for the story? What's my pain worth on the open market?" "Nothing." Ethan stepped forward instinctively, his hands raised in a gesture of desperate honesty. "Maggie, please, you have to. Believe me, I've never spoken to any journalists. I don't even know any journalists. I would never, ever betray your trust like that." The rain outside had intensified, and now it drummed against the windows with increasing urgency. The gray light filtering through the glass cast everything in shadows, making the tension in the room feel even more oppressive. "Then explain how they got that message." Her voice echoed off the walls and seemed to shake the very foundation of the house. "Explain how they knew about my father's hospice care, about the exact timing of his death, about every intimate detail of the worst night of my life." Thunder rolled across the sky, a low rumble that seemed to underscore the storm brewing inside the farmhouse. Lily's lower lip began to tremble, and she clutched her coloring book to her chest like a shield, her small body trembling with each raised voice. Ethan's shoulders sagged under the weight of accusations he couldn't defend against with facts, only with his word, a word that now seemed worthless. I can't explain it, he admitted, his voice heavy with defeat. I wish I could, but I can't. All I can give you is my word, and I know how that sounds now. But your word means absolutely nothing now. Maggie's voice had gone cold and professional again, but her eyes glistened with unshed tears that she refused to let fall. The executive mask was firmly back in place, but cracks showed around the edges. You're fired, Mr. Cole. Pack your things and get off my property. Now. Miss Maggie, no! Lily burst into tears, her small body shaking with sobs as she scrambled to her feet and ran to grab Maggie's hand. Please don't make us go, please. Daddy didn't do anything wrong. He's good. I promise he's good. Maggie looked down at the little girl, whose tears were now flowing freely, and for a moment, her resolve wavered. But she gently but firmly pulled her hand away, her movements careful despite her anger. I'm sorry, Lily. I really am. But your father made his choice when he decided to betray my trust. The room fell silent except for Lily's quiet sobs and the steady drum of rain against the windows. Ethan stood very still for a long moment, his jaw working as he processed the finality of the situation. Then he nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement. Come on, baby girl, he said softly to Lily, his voice gentle despite the storm raging inside him. Help Daddy pack up his tools. But Daddy, we can't leave? Lily's voice was thick with tears and confusion. This is our place now. Miss Maggie needs us. Ethan knelt down beside his daughter, his large hands gentle on her small shoulders. Sometimes we have to do hard things, sweetheart, he murmured, his voice steady despite the pain clearly visible in his eyes. Sometimes walking away is the right thing to do, even when it hurts. Outside, the other workers had gathered under the covered porch, their faces pressed against the rain-streaked windows as they tried to understand what was happening. Their whispered conversations created a low buzz of speculation and concern. Ethan methodically began packing his tools, each movement careful and precise despite the tremor in his hands. His toolbox had been his father's, then his, and now represented everything he had left of his trade and his pride. Each tool had its place. Each measurement had been memorized through years of honest work. Lily sniffled beside him, occasionally shooting, pleading looks at Maggie, who remained rigid by the door with her arms crossed tightly across her chest like armor. The sound of tools being carefully placed in their designated spots filled the silence, the soft click of screwdrivers finding their slots, the gentle thud of the hammer settling into its loop, the whisper of the tape measure retracting one final time. When everything was packed and secured, Ethan lifted his toolbox with both hands, feeling its familiar weight settle into his palms. He turned to face Maggie one last time, and the distance between them seemed to stretch far beyond the physical space of the room. It was filled now with broken trust, shattered hopes, and words that could never be taken back. The rain drummed steadily on the roof above them, a constant rhythm that seemed to count down the final moments of something that had been beautiful and was now destroyed. Sometimes faith means walking away when it hurts most, he said quietly, his voice barely audible above the storm. Then he gently guided Lily toward the door, his hand protective on her small shoulder. They walked to his old pickup truck through the strengthening rain, their shoulders hunched against both the weather and the crushing weight of the moment. The gravel crunched under their feet, and raindrops pelted their faces like tiny, cold accusations. Ethan helped Lily into the passenger seat, making sure she was buckled in safely before closing the door with a soft click. The truck's engine turned over with its familiar, reassuring grumble, and Ethan slowly pulled away from the farmhouse that had begun to feel like home. The windshield wipers beat a steady, melancholy rhythm against the rain that seemed determined to wash away all traces of their time there. In his rearview mirror, he could see Maggie still standing in the doorway, a solitary figure framed by the warm light of the home they had been rebuilding together. She looked small and alone, her professional armor no protection against the storm that raged both outside and within. As the distance grew, she became smaller and smaller, until finally the rain and mist swallowed her from view entirely, leaving nothing but empty road ahead and shattered dreams behind. 2 weeks dragged by like years at Harlow Innovations. Maggie sat in her father's old office, surrounded by stacks of reports and unanswered emails. The view of Indianapolis stretched before her, but her eyes kept drifting to the tablet showing the latest company headlines. Harlow Innovations stock drops amid leadership concerns. She rubbed her temples, fighting another headache. The discrimination accusations had evolved into whispers about her ability to lead. Board members questioned her judgment, and employees walked on eggshells around her. The warmth and progress they'd made at the community event seemed like a distant dream, Her assistant knocked softly. "Miss Harlow, there's a personal letter for you." Maggie barely looked up. "Just add it to the pile. It's different." Handwritten address, crayon decorations on the envelope. Something tugged at Maggie's heart. She held out her hand, and her assistant placed the small envelope in it. The return address was written in careful child's handwriting. Lily Cole. Maggie's fingers trembled as she opened it. A folded piece of construction paper fell onto her desk, covered in bright crayon colors. She unfolded it slowly, her throat tightening. The drawing showed 3 stick figures, holding hands under a giant rainbow. One was small, with yellow pigtails, clearly Lily. Next to her stood a tall figure with brown hair, Ethan, and on the other side, wearing what looked like a blue business suit, was Maggie herself. They were all smiling, standing in front of what could only be the farmhouse. Above them, written in wobbly letters, "Faith makes things right." On the back, Lily had written in her careful schoolgirl script, "Dear Miss Maggie, Daddy doesn't know I'm writing this. He's sad but won't say it. He still fixes things for people but doesn't smile anymore. I miss you. The flowers we planted are growing even though nobody waters them. Daddy says that's how faith works. It grows even when we forget about it. Love, Lily." A tear splashed onto the drawing, smudging one of the crayon clouds. Maggie stared at it, remembering the moment she'd accused Ethan of betraying her trust. She hadn't even given him a chance to explain. She'd been so quick to believe the worst, so ready to protect herself from being hurt that she'd hurt others instead. She opened her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard as she searched through old news articles about the leaked texts. There it was, buried in a follow-up story she'd been too angry to read. Source of leaked messages traced to corporate security breach, not individual access. The room seemed to spin. Ethan had never accessed her private messages. The leak had come from within her own company, probably someone trying to discredit her leadership. She'd fired an innocent man, humiliated him in front of others, and broken the trust of a child who'd opened her heart to her. The farmhouse stood unfinished on the outskirts of town, a testament to her rushed judgment. The community center her father had dreamed of remained half complete, just like the healing that had begun there. Windows gaped like sad eyes, and tarps fluttered over the unfinished roof. All the repairs Ethan never got to complete. Maggie walked to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. Below, the city bustled on, unaware of the small dramas of broken trust and missed chances playing out in hearts above. She thought of Ethan's quiet dignity as he'd packed his tools that rainy day. How he'd looked at her with hurt, but no hatred. "Sometimes faith means walking away when it hurts most," he'd said. Those words haunted her now. She touched Lily's drawing again, tracing the rainbow with her finger. The simple truth of a child's faith stared back at her. No complicated corporate politics, no fear of vulnerability, just pure belief that things could be made right. Maggie sank into her chair, tears flowing freely now. "What have I done?" she whispered to the empty office. The weight of her mistake pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She thought of all the times Ethan had shown her kindness, taught her to fix things with her own hands, helped her face her father's death with grace. She grabbed her keys and purse, Lily's drawing carefully tucked inside. "Cancel my meetings." She called to her assistant as she hurried past. "I need to fix something more important." The elevator seemed to crawl as it descended to the parking garage. Maggie's heart raced with the urgency of someone who finally sees clearly after weeks of darkness. She had to find Ethan. She had to make this right. The December wind cut through Maggie's wool coat like a blade as she stepped out of her black BMW, her Italian leather boots sinking into the frozen gravel of Jake's construction yard. Each exhale formed small silver clouds that dissipated quickly in the bitter morning air, and she pulled her coat tighter around herself. This was her 4th stop today in her desperate search for any trace of Ethan Cole, and with each failed attempt, the weight of her mistakes pressed heavier on her chest. The construction yard bustled with activity despite the cold. Workers in thick jackets and hard hats moved between stacks of lumber and metal beams, their voices carrying sharp and clear in the crisp air. The smell of diesel fuel and sawdust hung heavy around the temporary office trailer. "Sorry, ma'am." He picked up his last check 2 weeks ago, the burly foreman said, adjusting his yellow hard hat with calloused fingers. His breath steamed as he spoke, and his eyes held a respectful sadness. Good worker, that one. Quiet type, but reliable as sunrise. Always showed up early, stayed late when we needed him. Never complained, not once. Maggie nodded slowly, her throat tight as she clutched Lily's crayon, drawing deeper in her coat pocket. The paper had grown soft from her nervous handling throughout the morning. Each dead end made her heart sink a little lower, like stones dropping into a dark well. She'd already tried Miller's Hardware, where the clerk remembered Ethan buying roofing nails just last month, and Thompson's Lumber Yard, where the owner spoke fondly of Ethan's careful selection of materials for what he called small jobs that mattered to good people. Nobody had seen him recently. Nobody knew where he'd gone. As she drove her luxury sedan through Greenwood's winding back roads, the polished chrome and heated leather seats felt absurdly out of place among the modest ranch homes and small family businesses. Children's bikes lay scattered in front yards, and Christmas decorations, some elaborate, others clearly homemade, brightened windows and doorways. A memory flashed unbidden through her mind. Ethan's voice, gentle but firm as they'd walked through her father's house. Sometimes the richest folks are the ones who don't need much at all. How right he'd been, how blind she'd been to see it. At a red stoplight, she watched an elderly man in a threadbare coat struggling with paper grocery bags that threatened to split at the seams. Before the light could change, a teenager in a worn denim jacket rushed from across the street to help him, steadying the bags and walking beside the old man toward a small apartment building. When the elderly gentleman reached into his pocket and offered a crumpled dollar bill, the boy shook his head with a smile, said something that made them both laugh, and jogged back across the street. The scene brought immediate tears to Maggie's eyes. It was exactly the kind of thing Ethan would do, help without expecting anything in return, see, need, and respond without calculation or hesitation. She'd witnessed him do it a dozen times during their brief time together, yet somehow she'd convinced herself it was all an act. The local diner came into view through her blurred vision, its windows glowing warm and steamy from the breakfast crowd inside. Hand-painted letters on the glass advertised Betty's famous pancakes and coffee all day, every day. Maggie pulled her BMW into the small gravel lot, remembering how Ethan had mentioned this place with such fondness, how his whole face had lit up when he talked about bringing Lily here for chocolate chip pancakes on Saturday mornings. Inside, the warmth hit her like a gentle wave, along with the rich smells of coffee, maple syrup, and bacon sizzling on the grill. Red vinyl booths lined the walls, and a long counter dominated the center space, where locals in work clothes and winter jackets sat sharing coffee and conversation. Christmas garland draped cheerfully along the walls, and a small tree twinkled in the corner, decorated with handmade ornaments that looked like they'd been crafted by local children. "Excuse me," Maggie said softly to the middle-aged waitress behind the counter, her hands trembling slightly as she showed Ethan's picture on her phone. "Have you seen this man recently?" The waitress, her gray hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and her name tag reading Betty in cheerful red letters, paused in wiping down the counter. She studied the photo with kind eyes, and her weathered face immediately softened with recognition. "Oh, Ethan? Sure, honey. He and little Lily were here yesterday morning, sitting right there in that corner booth." Betty pointed to a spot by the window where weak winter sunlight streamed across a red table. "That child loves her pancakes with extra chocolate chips, and Ethan always orders black coffee and wheat toast, says he's saving room for her leftovers." Betty's eyes grew tender with obvious affection. "They've had it rough since Sarah passed. Lord rest her soul. But you won't hear him complain. Not once. Always leaves a tip, even when I know he's counting pennies to make ends meet." Maggie's throat tightened with shame and regret. She'd been so wrong about him, so quick to believe the worst when presented with what looked like evidence. The waitress must have noticed her distress, because she leaned forward with the practiced compassion of someone who'd seen plenty of heartbreak. "You look like you could use some coffee, honorable, and maybe some of those pancakes? I'm actually looking for him," Maggie managed, her voice barely above a whisper. I need to apologize for something." Betty's expression grew, knowing the look of someone who'd served coffee to broken hearts for decades. "You might check over at Grace Community Church, about 10 miles east of here. They're doing some renovation work on the fellowship hall. Ethan mentioned yesterday that he was helping out there, doing it for free because the congregation's been good to him and Lily." "Thank you," Maggie whispered, pulling a 20 from her wallet and leaving it on the counter beside her untouched coffee cup. "Honey," Betty called softly as Maggie reached the door, "whatever happened between you two, that man's got the kindest heart in 3 counties. If you're looking to make things right, you've come to do something good." As she drove toward the church, Maggie passed even more signs of the community spirit that Ethan had tried so patiently to show her. A group of neighbors with snow shovels working together to clear an elderly couple's long driveway, laughing and calling out encouragement to each other. A small independent bookstore with a handwritten "Pay What You Can" sign in the window and a basket of free books for children on the sidewalk. a modest food bank with a steady line of both donors and recipients, sharing smiles and genuine conversation despite the bitter cold, treating each other with dignity regardless of which side of charity they stood on. The farther she traveled from Greenwood's main downtown area, the more her expensive GPS system seemed to struggle with the rural roads. Maggie found herself navigating narrow country lanes, lined with bare oak and maple trees that stood like silent guardians against the gray December sky. Farmhouses sat well back from the road, smoke rising from chimneys, and she passed several small family cemeteries marked by weathered stone fences and iron gates. She almost missed the small wooden sign for Grace Community Church, partially hidden behind winter-dead vines that had grown wild over the roadside fence. The white letters on brown wood had faded with age and weather, and someone had recently cleared away the overgrowth to make it visible again. The sun was setting now, painting the western sky in brilliant shades of purple, orange, and deep rose that reflected off the patches of snow in the surrounding fields. Through the gathering dusk, she spotted Ethan's familiar old blue pickup truck, parked beside a modest church building that was clearly in the midst of renovation. Scaffolding wrapped around one side of the structure, and heavy plastic sheets fluttered and snapped in the evening wind like restless spirits. Maggie parked her BMW next to his battered truck, her hands shaking slightly on the leather steering wheel. The truck's hood was still warm when she walked past it. He was here somewhere, close enough that she could probably call his name and he'd hear her. But she sat back down in her car for a moment, watching her nervous breath fog up the windows, gathering the courage to face the man whose trust she'd shattered with her accusations and suspicions. Throughout her desperate search today, driving from business to business and door to door, she'd seen countless examples of what Ethan had been trying to teach her all along. True worth wasn't measured in stock prices or corporate success or the size of someone's bank account. It lived in small acts of kindness, performed without thought of reward. In the gentle, patient way he'd guided Lily through her grief over losing her mother. In his meticulous, caring restoration of her father's farmhouse, treating each damaged board and broken window as if it were precious. In his quiet dignity, even when she'd accused him falsely, when she'd let her own fears and past betrayals poison her judgment. The sun dipped lower behind the bare trees, and warm lights flickered on inside the church's finished section. Through a tall window, she could make out several figures moving around inside, carrying lumber and tools, their shadows dancing against the glass. One of them had to be Ethan. She recognized something in the careful, methodical way one shadow moved, the same deliberate grace she'd watched him bring to every task. Maggie took a deep, steadying breath and reached for her door handle. The cold air rushed in immediately, but she barely felt it. After hours of searching, of seeing the community that had embraced Ethan and Lily with open arms, of understanding finally what she'd thrown away with her lack of faith, it was time to make things right. If he'd let her, if it wasn't too late. Inside the small church, the scent of fresh-cut wood and sawdust filled the air. Late afternoon sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows, casting colorful shadows across the half-finished pews. Ethan Cole worked steadily, his skilled hands moving with practiced precision as he secured another wooden bench in place. His weathered tool belt hung low on his hips, carrying the familiar weight of hammers and measuring tape. The hollow echo of heels on hardwood made him pause. He didn't need to look up to know who it was. He'd recognize those purposeful steps anywhere. Still, he kept his eyes on his work for a moment longer, taking a deep breath to steady himself. When he finally raised his head, Maggie Harlow stood in the center aisle, looking different than he'd ever seen her. Gone was the polished CEO armor. Her hair was windblown, her cheeks pink from the cold, and her eyes carried a vulnerability that made his heart ache. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper in the church's stillness. He set down his hammer carefully, wiping his hands on his work jeans. "Maggie." His voice was gentle, free of accusation. She took a few steps closer, her designer boots incongruous against the sawdust-covered floor. "I've been looking everywhere for you." Her hands twisted together nervously, a gesture so unlike the confident executive he knew. "I've been here," he said simply, "helping rebuild what's broken." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Maggie's eyes filled with tears, and she brushed them away quickly with the back of her hand. "I was wrong," she began, her voice cracking. "So terribly wrong. The leak, it wasn't you. It was Trevor from IT. He admitted everything yesterday. He was trying to discredit me, make it look like I had hired someone to spy on the company." She took a shaky breath. "But I should have known better. You're the most honest person I've ever met." Ethan stood quietly, watching her struggle with the words. "I let my fear take over," she continued, moving closer. "When I saw those headlines, I panicked. I thought everything was falling apart again, just like with my father. And instead of trusting the good I knew was there, I lashed out at the person who had shown me nothing but kindness." A tear rolled down her cheek. "I'm so sorry, Ethan. I'm sorry I didn't trust you. I'm sorry I hurt Lily. I'm sorry I let my past wounds blind me to the truth that was right in front of me." Ethan's eyes softened. He took a step toward her, his work boots scuffing against the floor. "Maggie," he said quietly, "forgiveness isn't earned. It's accepted." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Someone wise taught me that after Sarah died. I was so angry at God, at the world, at myself. But healing didn't start until I learned to accept forgiveness, both giving and receiving it." Maggie's shoulders shook as she tried to hold back tears. "How can you be so kind after what I did?" "Because I know what it's like to be broken," he said simply, "and I know what it's like to need grace." Suddenly, a small figure darted out from behind one of the pews, pigtails flying. "See? I told you she'd come back," Lily shouted, launching herself at Maggie with the pure joy only a child could possess. Maggie caught her, stumbling slightly as Lily wrapped her arms around her waist. "Lily, you were here the whole time?" "Of course." Lily beamed up at her. "I prayed really hard that you'd find us. And look, God answered." Ethan couldn't help but chuckle, the sound mixing with Maggie's tearful laugh. "You knew she was coming?" he asked his daughter. "Duh, Daddy." Lily rolled her eyes dramatically. "Miss Maggie's part of our family now, and family always finds each other." Maggie hugged Lily tighter, looking over the girl's head at Ethan with wonder in her eyes. "She's right, you know," she said softly. "You both became my family when I wasn't looking." She straightened up, keeping one arm around Lily while wiping her eyes with her free hand. "That's actually part of why I came. I want you to come back to the farmhouse." Ethan tilted his head, waiting. "Not as an employee," she continued quickly, "but as my partner, equal partner, in rebuilding hope, not just the house, but what it stands for. My father's dream of a community center, your gift for fixing what's broken, my resources to make it happen. Together, we could make something beautiful." Lily bounced excitedly. "Can we, Daddy? Please?" Ethan looked at them both, his daughter's hopeful face and Maggie's earnest eyes, and felt something settle in his heart. This was what Sarah had always told him. Faith works in mysterious ways, but always right on time. "Yes," he said simply, and opened his arms to them both. They came together in a group hug, laughing through their tears as Lily squeezed them tight. The late afternoon sun streamed through the stained glass, painting them in patches of gold and blue and rose, a moment of grace captured in colored light. "Thank you," Maggie whispered against his shoulder. "For what?" he asked softly. "For showing me what real faith looks like." She pulled back slightly, smiling through her tears. "It looks like forgiveness, like second chances, like love." Lily beamed up at them both. "And like family," she added firmly, making them laugh again. The sound of their shared laughter echoed through the empty church, filling the space with something that felt a lot like hope. The December morning air was crisp and clean as people gathered outside the restored farmhouse. Its fresh white paint gleamed in the winter sunlight, and wreaths adorned each window. The old building stood proud against the pale blue sky, no longer the neglected structure it had been just months ago. Ethan adjusted the portable heaters on the wraparound porch, where folding chairs had been set up for today's announcement. His breath made little clouds in the cold air as he worked. Lily bounced around, helping to arrange cookies and hot chocolate on a long table, wearing her favorite red winter coat and matching mittens. "Is everything perfect enough, Daddy?" Lily asked, rearranging a plate of snickerdoodles for the third time. Ethan smiled, remembering how far they'd come. "It's more than perfect, sweetheart. Miss Maggie will love it." Cars began pulling into the gravel driveway, their tires crunching on the frost-covered stones. Community members emerged bundled in winter coats, veterans from the local VFW post, single parents Ethan knew from church, and familiar faces from town who had helped with the renovations. Maggie's silver SUV pulled up last. She stepped out wearing a deep blue wool coat, her face glowing with excitement despite the cold. Lily ran to her immediately, wrapping her arms around Maggie's waist. "Miss Maggie, we made everything beautiful for you," Lily exclaimed. Maggie hugged her back tightly. "You sure did, sweet girl." She caught Ethan's eye over Lily's head and smiled warmly. The gathered crowd of about 50 people settled into their seats, wrapped in blankets Ethan and Lily had thoughtfully provided. The portable heaters hummed quietly, creating pockets of warmth in the winter morning. Maggie took her place at the small podium they'd set up. She adjusted the microphone, her hands steady now where they once would have trembled. The past few weeks had changed her. There was a softness to her professional demeanor that hadn't existed before. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice clear and strong. "Thank you all for coming today. This farmhouse has been more than just a renovation project. It's become a symbol of what we can accomplish when we work together, when we believe in second chances." She paused, looking out at the faces before her. "Today, I'm proud to announce the Lily Project, named after a very special little girl who taught me about unconditional love and faith." She smiled at Lily, who beamed back from her spot beside Ethan. "The Lily Project will provide employment opportunities at Harlow Innovations for single parents and veterans in our community. But more than that, this farmhouse will serve as a community center, a place for job training, childcare, and support services." A murmur of approval went through the crowd. Ethan watched as several single parents wiped away tears, hope bright in their eyes. "This initiative," Maggie continued, "comes from a deep understanding that sometimes we all need a helping hand. Sometimes we need someone to believe in us when we've stopped believing in ourselves." Her eyes met Ethan's briefly, and he nodded encouragingly. After explaining more details about the project, Maggie surprised everyone by calling Ethan to the podium. He walked up, his work boots solid against the wooden porch boards. "Ethan Cole started as our contractor," Maggie said, "but he's become so much more. He's shown us what it means to lead with integrity and compassion. Ethan, would you say a few words?" Ethan hadn't expected this, but as he looked out at the gathered faces, the words came naturally. "You know, when I first came to this farmhouse, I was just looking to fix some broken things. Turns out, sometimes the things that need fixing most aren't made of wood or nails." He cleared his throat, emotion making his voice rough. "Faith isn't always about big miracles. Sometimes it's about showing up day after day, believing things can get better. It's about extending grace to others and to yourself. This project isn't just about giving people jobs. It's about giving them dignity, purpose, and community." Several veterans nodded in agreement, and Ethan saw tears in more than a few eyes. "Second chances are powerful things," he continued. "They can restore what's broken, heal what's hurting, and bring light back to dark places. I've seen it happen right here, in this house." When he finished speaking, the applause was warm and genuine. Maggie's eyes shone with pride as she returned to the podium to wrap up the presentation. Afterward, people mingled on the porch and in the farmhouse, sharing hot chocolate and cookies. The rooms buzzed with conversation and laughter. Veterans traded stories with single moms, business people chatted with contractors, and everyone seemed to find common ground. Lily flitted between groups like a happy butterfly, making sure everyone had enough cookies. She'd drawn name tags for all the volunteers, decorated with little hearts and stars. Inside the newly finished kitchen, Maggie found Ethan leaning against the counter, watching the scene through the window. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. You did all this," he replied. "You took a setback and turned it into something beautiful." She shook her head. "We did this together." Through the window, they could see people gathering around the fire pit in the backyard, where someone had started roasting marshmallows. Children's laughter mixed with adult conversation, creating a symphony of community and connection. The afternoon light began to fade, but warm light spilled from every window of the farmhouse. Christmas lights twinkled along the porch railings, and candles flickered in mason jars on the tables. The old house seemed to glow from within, as if it too was celebrating its new purpose. In the gathering dusk, Lily's voice rang out clear and sweet as she taught a group of children to sing "This Little Light of Mine." Other voices joined in until the song filled the air with hope and joy. The farmhouse that had once stood empty and neglected now pulsed with life and purpose. In its rooms and on its grounds, strangers were becoming friends, and broken things were being made whole again. Soft snowflakes drifted down from the darkening sky, each one catching the glow of hundreds of candles held by the gathered townspeople. The farmhouse, now fully restored, stood like a warm beacon against the winter twilight, its windows aglow with golden light that spilled onto the fresh snow. Maggie stood on the front porch, her breath visible in the cold air. She wore a deep blue wool coat, and her usually perfect hair was dotted with snowflakes. In her hands, she held a single white candle. The flame flickered as she faced the crowd, her voice carrying across the hushed gathering. "Tonight, we're here to celebrate more than just a restored building," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "We're here to honor those who watch over us from above." She paused, gathering her strength. "Dad, I know you're here with us. You always believed in second chances, in building something meaningful. This place, it's your legacy of love." Ethan stood to the side, his heart swelling as he watched her. Lily pressed against his leg, holding her own small candle carefully with both hands. The crowd remained silent, respect hanging heavy in the air. "And, Sarah Cole," Maggie continued, turning slightly to meet Ethan's eyes, "though I never met you, your spirit of kindness lives on through your husband and daughter. This place wouldn't exist without the faith you instilled in them." Tears sparkled in the candlelight as they rolled down Maggie's cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. Instead, she lifted her candle higher, and the crowd followed suit, creating a sea of tiny, dancing lights. "Let's pray," she said softly, "for those we've lost, for those we love, and for the miracles that bring broken people together." The gathering bowed their heads. Even those who rarely attended church joined in the moment of reverence. The snow continued to fall, each flake illuminated by hundreds of candle flames. When the prayer ended, Lily stepped forward. She wore the red winter coat Maggie had given her last week, her blonde hair in two neat braids. Her small voice began the first notes of "Silent Night," pure and clear in the winter air. Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright. One by one, others joined in, their voices rising in harmony. Mrs. Thompson from the church choir, Mr. Rodriguez from the hardware store, the veterans who'd found work through the Lily Project. Their voices blended together, creating something beautiful and unexpected. Ethan watched as people wiped their eyes, moved by the simple power of his daughter's song. But his gaze kept returning to Maggie. She stood straight and tall, yet there was a new softness to her now, a vulnerability she no longer tried to hide. The corporate armor she'd worn like a shield when they first met had melted away, revealing something far more precious. The way she looked at Lily with such tenderness, the gentle way she touched the old farmhouse walls, as if thanking them for their strength. The quiet moments when she thought no one was watching, when she'd smile at nothing in particular. Peace finally settling into her bones. Ethan realized he'd been falling in love with her gradually, like snow accumulating on the ground. So slowly, you hardly notice until you look up, and everything has changed. It wasn't the desperate, passionate love of youth. This was deeper, built on shared pain and healing, on watching each other grow and change. The song ended, its final notes floating away into the night sky. In the silence that followed, someone called out, "Light 'em up!" Suddenly, the first fireworks screamed into the air, exploding in a shower of red and gold sparks. More followed, painting the snow-filled sky with color. Children squealed with delight. Parents pulled them close, sharing blankets and thermoses of hot chocolate. The community they'd built together, it was all here, wrapped in winter wonder and hope. Maggie stood watching the display, her face illuminated by each burst of light. Without thinking, Ethan moved closer. Their shoulders touched, and neither pulled away. The heat of her body reached through layers of winter clothing, warming something deep in his soul. When his fingers found hers, it felt as natural as breathing. Her hand was cold from the winter air, but it fit perfectly in his. She squeezed gently, and in that simple gesture was every word they didn't need to say yet. Above them, the fireworks continued their celebration, but the real magic was in that small point of contact between their hands. Two people who had been broken, now holding each other together. Two paths that had crossed by chance, now weaving into something stronger. The snow fell steadily, covering everything in a blanket of white possibility. Lily leaned against them both, humming Silent Night under her breath. Together, they watched the sky explode with color, their joined hands a quiet promise in the winter night. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed midnight, its soft resonance filling the quiet farmhouse. Maggie sat cross-legged on the plush rug before the crackling fireplace, her silk blouse traded for a cozy sweater that still smelled faintly of pine and cookies from their earlier celebrations. The Christmas tree lights twinkled in the corner, casting gentle shadows that danced across the newly restored hardwood floors. On the weathered leather couch behind her, Ethan had dozed off, his strong hand still holding the toy truck he'd been assembling for Lily. His face looked peaceful in sleep, the worry lines that usually creased his forehead smoothed away. Lily lay curled against his chest, her small form rising and falling with each breath. still wearing the angel wings from the church pageant. A strand of tinsel was tangled in her hair, catching the firelight like strands of silver. Maggie drew her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them as she watched the flames dance. The house creaked softly in the winter night, but it wasn't the hollow sound she remembered from months ago. Now it felt alive, like a content sigh. The walls that had once held so much pain and regret now seemed to embrace her with memories of laughter and new beginnings. Her gaze drifted to the coffee table where her phone lay, the same phone that had brought Ethan into her life. She reached for it, her fingers trembling slightly as they had that first day in her office. But this time, the trembling came from a different place. Not from anger or fear, but from the weight of finally being ready. The screen illuminated her face as she opened her messages. The draft was still there, unchanged since that rainy November night. The cursor blinked steadily, like a patient friend waiting for her to find the right words. She glanced at the mantel, where her father's photograph stood in a simple wooden frame Ethan had crafted. The picture showed him in his younger days, standing proudly in front of the farmhouse, his eyes crinkling at the corners just like hers did when she smiled. "Oh, Dad," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the crackling fire. She remembered their last conversation, full of corporate numbers and cold statistics. How wrong it had been to let things end that way. Behind her, Lily stirred in her sleep, mumbling something about angels and Christmas cookies. Maggie smiled, thinking of how the little girl had insisted on leaving extra cookies for the grown-up angels watching over them. Her pure faith had been a constant reminder of what really mattered. Maggie's fingers hovered over the keyboard. The message she'd tried to send that night still waited. "Dad, I forgive you. I'm coming home tomorrow." But those words belonged to a different person, a different time. They felt hollow now, like echoes in an empty room. She deleted the draft slowly, letter by letter, watching each character disappear until the screen was blank. Then, with a deep breath, she began to type again. The words came easily now, flowing from a place of healing rather than hurt. "Dad, I forgive you. I've finally found home." Her thumb hesitated over the send button. It seemed almost silly, sending a message to a number that would never answer. But Lily's words from weeks ago floated back to her. "Angels have special mailboxes for messages from the heart." Maggie pressed send. The message swooped away with a soft whoosh, disappearing into the digital ether. She sat still for a moment, letting the weight of years of unspoken words lift from her shoulders. Then, with gentle movements, she set the phone down beside her father's photograph. In the firelight, tears traced silent paths down her cheeks, but her smile was radiant. The tears weren't the bitter ones she'd shed alone in her car months ago, or the angry ones that had fallen during countless sleepless nights in her empty apartment. These were the kind of tears that cleansed and renewed, like spring rain washing away winter's last frost. Looking at her father's picture, she noticed details she'd missed before, the way his hand rested on the farmhouse's porch railing, proud but gentle, just as she now touched the restored wood. The way his smile held a hint of mischief, much like Lily's. The way he stood tall but with open arms, ready to embrace whatever came next. The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. On the couch, Ethan shifted slightly, his arm tightening protectively around Lily. The Christmas tree lights continued their slow, peaceful dance. And outside, fresh snow fell silently on the farm that had become so much more than just a piece of property. Maggie reached up and touched the frame of her father's photograph, her fingers tracing the smooth wood Ethan had sanded and finished by hand. The tears still fell, but her smile never wavered. In this moment, in this restored house full of love and new memories, she finally understood what her father had tried to tell her all along. Home wasn't a place to come back to, but a place to grow from. The fire crackled softly, as if in agreement, and Maggie let her hand rest beside her phone, at peace with both what was lost and what had been found. Golden morning sunlight streamed through the farmhouse windows, casting warm rectangles across the newly finished kitchen floor. Steam rose from 2 coffee mugs on the counter as Maggie whisked pancake batter in a large ceramic bowl, her sleeves rolled up and a light dusting of flour on her cheek. Ethan stood beside her at the stove, expertly flipping golden brown pancakes while keeping an eye on the sizzling bacon. "I think we'll need another batch," Ethan said, glancing at the growing stack of pancakes. "Those volunteers eat like teenage boys." Maggie laughed, reaching for more eggs. Well, they deserve it. Everyone's worked so hard these past few weeks. The kitchen smelled of butter, coffee, and possibility. Outside, pickup trucks began pulling into the gravel driveway, carrying volunteers ready for another day of community service. The Lily Project had grown faster than either of them had expected, touching more lives than they'd dreamed possible. Speaking of work, Maggie said, measuring flour into the bowl, "Tell me more about this carpentry program you're planning. The one for local teens?" Ethan's eyes lit up as he transferred another perfect pancake to the stack. "Well, I've been thinking about all these kids who don't have direction after school. Some of them need a trade, something solid they can build a future on." He paused, checking the bacon. "Just like this house needed rebuilding, some of these kids need a foundation." Maggie stopped whisking and looked at him, touched by the depth of his compassion. "You really think about everyone, don't you?" "Learned that from Sarah," he said softly, a gentle smile crossing his face. "She always said everyone deserves a chance to build something beautiful." They worked in comfortable silence for a moment, moving around each other with an ease that spoke of growing familiarity. Maggie pulled plates from the cupboard, while Ethan arranged the bacon on paper towels. "We could use the workshop out back," Maggie suggested, setting plates on the counter. "It's perfect for teaching small groups, and I bet some of our regular volunteers would help mentor." "That's what I was thinking," Ethan nodded, his face brightening. "Start with basic safety and tools, then move on to small projects. Maybe even help with some of the Lily Project renovations once they're ready." The morning light caught the silver in his hair as he turned to face her fully. "You know, when I first came here with that lost phone, I never imagined that we'd end up building all this." Maggie finished, gesturing to encompass more than just the restored farmhouse. "That we'd end up rebuilding ourselves," he corrected gently. Their eyes met, and Maggie felt that familiar warmth spread through her chest. Before she could respond, the screen door banged open and several volunteers trooped in, bringing the crisp December air with them. "Something smells amazing in here," called Mike, a retired veteran who'd become one of their most dedicated helpers. "Coffee's ready," Maggie announced, turning to grab more mugs. "Pancakes coming right up." The kitchen filled with cheerful chatter as volunteers helped themselves to breakfast. Ethan and Maggie continued cooking, working in sync as they discussed more plans for the Lily Project's expansion. "We should reach out to the community college," Maggie suggested, passing a fresh plate of pancakes to the hungry crew. "Maybe set up some kind of certification program for the carpentry classes. And partner with local businesses for materials." Ethan added, "I know several suppliers who'd probably donate supplies for a good cause." Their planning was interrupted by the thunder of small feet running down the stairs. Lily burst into the kitchen, still in her Christmas pajamas, her hair wild from sleep. "We're family now," she shouted, bouncing with excitement. She threw her arms around Maggie's waist, then hugged her father's legs. "All of us, the whole big family." Maggie and Ethan's eyes met over Lily's head, sharing a smile that held volumes of unspoken understanding. In that moment, looking around at the volunteers who had become friends, the house that had become a home, and the little girl who had helped heal their hearts, they knew Lily was right. "Yes, sweetheart," Maggie said softly, smoothing Lily's tangled hair. "We're family now." Ethan reached out and squeezed Maggie's hand, his touch warm and sure. The morning sun streamed through the windows, lighting up the kitchen full of laughter, love, and the promise of new beginnings. In every sense of the word, they had become family, not just with each other, but with the entire community that had grown around them. Twinkling lights adorned the farmhouse porch, their gentle glow reflecting off the fresh blanket of snow that covered the yard. Inside, warmth and laughter spilled from every room as townspeople, volunteers, and workers gathered to celebrate New Year's Eve. The restored wooden floors gleamed beneath dancing feet, and the aroma of hot cider and fresh-baked cookies filled the air. Lily darted between groups of guests in her new red party dress, her patent leather shoes clicking against the floor as she distributed hand-drawn New Year cards. "To everyone, these are special blessing cards," she explained to each recipient with utmost seriousness. "They're for good luck in the new year." Ethan stood near the fireplace, wearing a crisp blue button-down shirt that Maggie had insisted on buying him for Christmas. He watched his daughter with pride, noting how naturally she brought smiles to people's faces. Mike, the retired veteran, stood beside him, nursing a cup of cider. "That girl of yours," Mike said, shaking his head with a grin, "she's got more wisdom than most grown folks I know." "She gets that from her mother," Ethan replied softly, his eyes drifting to where Maggie stood across the room, elegant in a simple black dress, chatting with a group of volunteers. The old grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 11, its deep resonance cutting through the festive music and conversation. Maggie caught Ethan's eye and nodded slightly, It was time for her speech. Someone turned down the music as Maggie made her way to the center of the living room. The crowd quieted, faces turned expectantly toward her. She cleared her throat, hands clasped loosely in front of her. "First, I want to thank you all for coming tonight," she began, her voice clear and warm. "Looking around this room, I see more than just volunteers and workers. I see family." She paused, drawing a deep breath. 6 months ago, this house stood empty, much like I was inside. My father had just passed away, and I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. Her eyes found Ethan's across the room, and her voice grew stronger. But then a man found my phone in a puddle at a gas station. A man who, instead of just mailing it back or turning it in, drove 2 hours to return it personally. That man taught me about integrity, about doing the right thing even when no one's watching. Ethan felt heat rise in his cheeks as several people patted him on the back. Lily beamed up at him, slipping her small hand into his. "And then there's this amazing little girl," Maggie continued, smiling at Lily. "She showed me that faith doesn't have to be complicated, that sometimes it's as simple as believing good things will happen, even when everything seems dark." Maggie's voice softened. "You've all taught me about grace, about second chances, about building something beautiful from broken pieces." She raised her glass. "So tonight, I'd like to propose a toast to new beginnings and old miracles." "To new beginnings and old miracles," the crowd echoed, glasses lifting in unison. As conversations resumed and music filled the air once more, Ethan made his way through the crowd to where Maggie stood. "That was quite a speech," he said quietly. She smiled up at him, her eyes bright. "I meant every word." They moved together through the party, greeting guests and sharing stories. The minutes ticked by as midnight approached. Someone dimmed the lights, and the crowd began to gather near the windows, where they could see both the clock and the town's fireworks display. 10. The crowd began to count. 9. 8. Lily bounced excitedly between Ethan and Maggie, holding both their hands. 7. 6. 5. Ethan turned to face Maggie, his heart pounding. 4. 3. 2. 1. Happy New Year. As cheers erupted and fireworks burst in the distance, painting the snow-covered yard in brilliant colors, Ethan leaned down and kissed Maggie gently. Her lips were soft against his, carrying the promise of tomorrow, of love rebuilt from loss, of faith restored through grace. The fireworks continued to illuminate the night sky, casting magical shadows through the farmhouse windows as the new year began, full of hope and possibility. Spring breeze carried the sweet scent of blooming flowers across the farmhouse grounds. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the freshly painted sign that swayed gently above the entrance. The Lily Project, where second chances begin. The white farmhouse stood proudly against the blue sky, its windows sparkling and welcoming. Ethan Cole wiped sawdust from his worn jeans as he stepped back to admire his students' work. 6 wooden birdhouses lined the workshop table, each one unique in its own way. The smell of fresh-cut pine filled the converted barn where he taught his carpentry classes. "Remember," he said to the group of teenagers gathered around him, "it's not about making it perfect. It's about putting your heart into every piece you create." His gentle voice carried the wisdom of someone who had learned that lesson the hard way. In the main building, Maggie's voice drifted through the open windows as she led a workshop for single parents. "Your past doesn't define your future," she said, her business suit replaced by casual jeans and a comfortable sweater. "I learned that right here in this very room." The participants nodded, some wiping tears, others taking notes. They saw in Maggie someone who understood their struggles. Her corporate experience now served a different purpose, helping others rebuild their lives one step at a time. Outside in the garden, 10-year-old Lily knelt in the soft earth, her hands covered in dirt as she carefully planted new flowers. Her pink sun hat bobbed as she worked, humming quietly to herself. She placed each seedling with tender care, speaking softly to each one. "This yellow one is for Mommy," she whispered, patting the soil around a marigold. "And this white one is for Maggie's daddy." She sat back on her heels, surveying her work with satisfaction. They can share the sunshine together in heaven. Throughout the day, people came and went through the farmhouse doors. Veterans learned new skills in Ethan's workshop, while single mothers attended job training sessions with Maggie. The kitchen buzzed with activity as volunteers prepared lunch for everyone, the aroma of homemade bread and soup filling the air. In the afternoon, Ethan found Maggie in their shared office, going through applications for the next round of programs. Her reading glasses perched on her nose, reminding him of how far they'd come from that first meeting in her corporate office. He placed a cup of coffee on her desk, made just the way she liked it. "Thank you," she smiled up at him, her eyes soft with affection. "Did you see the new birdhouses? They're getting better every week." He nodded, pride evident in his voice. These kids just needed someone to believe in them. "Just like we all did," Maggie replied, reaching for his hand. Later, as the day wound down, community members began heading home. The golden light of sunset painted the farmhouse in warm hues, casting long shadows across the renewed property. The gardens Lily had planted were beginning to show signs of life, tiny green shoots reaching for the sky. Ethan, Maggie, and Lily settled onto the wide porch steps, their favorite spot for ending the day. The wooden swing Ethan had built creaked gently in the evening breeze. Lily nestled between them, her small hands holding onto both of theirs. They watched as the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The farmhouse windows reflected the sunset, glowing like warm beacons in the gathering dusk. Birds called their evening songs from the new houses in the trees, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell chimed. "Funny how one lost phone found 3 hearts," Ethan said softly, his voice full of wonder as he squeezed both their hands. The farmhouse stood bathed in the last light of day, its windows warm and inviting, a beacon of hope for all who needed it, and a testament to the power of forgiveness and faith reborn. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Ethan Cole, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.